Ever since my husband replaced the wedding photo at the head of the bed with an oil painting done by his senior sister, I suddenly felt exhausted. When I presented the divorce agreement to him, he spoke with a cold face. "Don't I even have the right to change a painting? Divorcing me? You don't want that son you hold in the palm of your hand anymore?" I nodded. I didn't want any of it. After all, my precious son was just like his father, both placed another woman first. Ryan sat across from me, expressionlessly flipping through the divorce agreement I handed him. He didn't look carefully, just skimmed through it once and closed it. "Just because I changed a painting? You're divorcing me over such a trivial matter? Think carefully, I don't have time to play along with your fuss. You don't want custody of that son you hold in the palm of your hand?" I glanced at Kevin, who was clearly past his bedtime but still sitting on the sofa watching TV, and replied, "I don't want it." Ryan signed the divorce agreement indifferently, looking at me faintly as if I were being unreasonable. This afternoon, as usual, I prepared dinner at home, sweet and sour pork ribs, the favorite of both father and son. Watching the clock hands tick by on the wall, there was still no movement at the door. I called Ryan. It rang for 2 seconds before showing the other party was busy. Clearly, he had rejected the call. Finally, past 10 o'clock, the father and son carefully carried a well-packaged painting back home. This was the third time the food had been reheated. But they tacitly ignored the dishes on the table and hurried to the bedroom. I walked to the door and saw Ryan preparing to take down the wedding photo hanging at the head of the bed. "Why suddenly change it?" I asked. Ryan didn't stop his actions and retorted, "Don't I even have the right to change a painting?" Kevin stood beside him, tiptoeing to hand the painting to Ryan with effort. He curved his eyes and smiled sweetly. "Dad, when can we go eat burgers with Aunt Vivian again?" Ryan quickly covered Kevin's mouth and glanced at me. "I didn't tell you just to avoid misunderstandings." This Vivian was Ryan's senior sister, and also mine. Recently, due to a job transfer, she was working in the same laboratory as Ryan. I lowered my head and slowly looked at the food on the table that seemed about to cool again, saying softly, "Next time, don't take Kevin to eat fast food, his stomach isn't good to begin with." "All right," Ryan merely responded, hanging the painting from Kevin's hands at the head of the bed. After adjusting the position, he smiled satisfactorily and took a photo. "Dad, Aunt Vivian is amazing. She can even paint." Kevin looked at the painting on the wall with admiration. I glanced at the painting on the wall, a romanticist oil painting. It turned out to be painted by Vivian. Ryan just smiled broadly, continuously tapping on his phone screen. Kevin eagerly climbed onto the bed, stretching his little head to stare at Ryan's phone. "Dad, what are you chatting with Aunt Vivian about?" "I want to chat with Aunt Vivian too." After Ryan signed the divorce agreement, I prepared to leave that very night. But looking at this house where I had lived for nearly 8 years, I was somewhat at a loss for where to start. "It's too late today, you can leave tomorrow," Ryan said, looking at me. I shook my head. "Today it is." I packed my essentials, put the wedding ring back in its place, and didn't take anything else. As I dragged my suitcase to the door to change shoes, Kevin walked over, timidly looking at me without a word. Looking at this little one I had raised for 6 years, my heart uncontrollably stirred. I said, "I divorced your dad. From now on, listen to your dad well. Eat less junk food, and remember you're allergic to seafood, don't eat it." Kevin rolled his eyes, completely unconcerned. "Humph, anyway, Dad said you'll come back in a few days. You have no friends here, only Dad and I are with you." Then, he tiptoed and whispered in my ear, "Mom, why don't you just never come back? I don't like you, I like Aunt Vivian. If you don't come back, Aunt Vivian can be my mom." Kevin's words eroded the last bit of softness in me. They say children's words are innocent, but only such children speak without mincing words, expressing their truest thoughts. The son I had held in the palm of my hand since he was little had never liked me. I said nothing more, picked up my luggage, and left. What Kevin said wasn't entirely unreasonable, I indeed had no friends here. Back then, Ryan and I were in a long-distance relationship. Because I didn't want to lose him and wanted a future with him, I left my familiar hometown and quit my satisfying job. At that time, I loved passionately, always believing the right person would wait for me ahead. Later, we were indeed very affectionate and gave birth to our cute son, Kevin. Kevin needed care, and Ryan was unwilling to give up his work. In marriage, someone always has to make sacrifices, right? I understood his implication. Moreover, the job I found in this city was indeed not as good as Ryan's. So, with the idea that as long as we were happy, I willingly stayed home as his virtuous helper, taking care of our life and our son. Until Vivian was transferred to Ryan's laboratory, I found our relationship deteriorating day by day. What faded, faded, what broke, broke. Even Kevin was the same, telling me more than once that he wanted Vivian to be his mom. I dragged my luggage, standing on the street at dawn to hail a cab. The night wind was more desolate than my heart. I rented a small apartment facing the sun, with good lighting. Previously at home, I would write some research materials and papers. Today, I received good news of an award. The prize money wasn't much but not little, enough for me to live on for a year or so. This morning, after getting up, I felt a rare leisure. No need to jump up at the alarm or bustle about Kevin's school matters. I looked in the mirror, carefully applied light makeup, and tidied my hair. I looked much more spirited. I also signed up for a fitness class. Although days at home involved playing with Kevin and doing a series of household chores, there was no lack of exercise. Outsiders might gossip that I didn't work and was a useless housewife. Actually, I didn't care, because I knew the facts weren't like that. If relying only on Ryan's salary, it would be hard for Kevin to live such a pampered life. I cleared my mind and prepared to draft a resume. I still wanted to go back to work, to stand in a laboratory rather than just sit at a computer desk. In the afternoon, I went to eat my favorite hot pot. Because I catered to the father and son's tastes, our home cooking rarely included spice. Now, eating the red-hot pot felt somewhat addictive. This also gradually changed my lifestyle habits. In the evening, I received a call from Ryan. His voice was as usual, neither salty nor bland. "I'm calling to ask, there's a sealed box of your things here. I haven't opened it. Give me an address, and I'll mail it to you." I thought for a moment and said, "You can look, it's just some useless little things I kept from before. I don't need them, throw them away." Ryan on the other end hesitated. "Right, in the future, if you find my things, just throw them all away, no need to bother calling again." After saying that, I hung up. That box contained little things from when Ryan and I were together, like notes, gifts he gave me, and such. At the time, I couldn't bear to throw them away, so I kept them all. Now, they should just be a pile of junk. After the interview, I successfully joined a research company that was willing to provide me with a laboratory for research. After work in the afternoon, I went to the supermarket to buy groceries. At home, I always racked my brain to vary the dishes for them, catering to their tastes. Now, I should cater to my own stomach as well. Just as I was pushing the shopping cart, the phone rang. It was Kevin's school teacher. "Kevin's mom, I wanted to ask if you forgot to pick up the child today. All the other kids have been picked up, only Kevin is left here." I glanced at the time, it had been an hour since Kevin's school let out. But I continued pushing the cart, with no intention of changing my plans for this. "Teacher, it's like this, Kevin's dad and I have divorced, and custody is with his dad now. Please contact his dad, I'll give you the number." "Ah, so that's it. Because usually it's you who comes, and little Kevin told me to call you, so sorry to bother you." The teacher sounded apologetic. I was about to say it was fine and hang up when Kevin took the teacher's phone and said to me, "Mom, you're so stingy. Dad is very busy with work, you have nothing to do, can't you come pick me up?" Humph, if it were Aunt Vivian, she would definitely come pick me up. Hearing this, my heart felt no ripples. "Kevin, your dad and I have divorced, I won't come pick you up anymore. If no one picks you up in the future, tell the teacher to call your dad, or if you want, call your Aunt Vivian." After saying that, I hung up. I don't remember teaching Kevin to be like this. When he was little, Ryan was busy with work and had little time to accompany him, so I told Kevin that Dad worked hard and we should be understanding. Children always get used to the adults at home pampering them, taking it for granted. I rubbed my forehead. Forget it, let him be. But my phone didn't stop for a moment. After dinner in the evening, Ryan called again. Laura, Kevin's stomach issue flared up again. I've searched the whole house and can't find his medicine, where did you put it? I suppressed my anger and calmly said, in the cabinet under the TV. Oh, found it. Also, Kevin's teacher called you today, right? I was a bit busy this afternoon and went late, did it disturb you? I didn't know what Ryan wanted to say, it seemed like he was making small talk. It did disturb me, so can you please not call me anymore in the future? In the past, when I called, he would reject it and never called me. Yet in these short few days, calls came one after another. I changed my SIM card, and during this period, Ryan didn't call again. I immersed myself in the laboratory, often staying the whole day. Here, I could feel my most original passion, as if returning to university days. Previously, I was also a student who loved research and experiments. But at some point, my dreams and original aspirations were absorbed by life, willingly abandoned by me. The director came to the lab to tell me a project needed handover. I took off my gloves and walked out of the lab, finding familiar figures in the reception room. Ryan, with Kevin beside him. Through the glass, Ryan was awkwardly explaining to the director why he brought the child. I entered the reception room, and Ryan inadvertently frowned. Dad. Kevin tugged at Ryan's hem, murmuring softly. Oh, this is the person in charge of our project, she'll handle the handover. The director pointed to me and introduced. I smiled slightly. Director, no need to introduce, this is my ex-husband. Leave it to me here, you go ahead and be busy. The director smiled awkwardly and left the reception room. I looked at the materials and said, logically, your team should have one more person. Just as I said it, there was a knock at the door. Vivian walked in. Sorry, I'm late. Vivian sat beside Ryan and his son. Kevin, I bought you cola and candy. She took out the snacks and handed them to Kevin. Kevin's eyes lit up. He hugged Vivian tightly and kissed her cheek sweetly. Thank you, Aunt Vivian. Perhaps because I usually only let Kevin eat these candies occasionally, he held the snacks but subconsciously looked at me. I averted my gaze, with no intention of reminding him as before that he couldn't eat too many candies. Laura, long time no see, you've joined here? After giving Kevin the snacks, Vivian said to me. I nodded, with no intention of exchanging pleasantries. Let's get straight to the point. During the handover, Ryan seemed always distracted, occasionally zoning out or not hearing my words clearly. But fortunately, it finally ended. After completing the work handover, I plunged back into the laboratory. Until 7 in the evening, I left the lab but found the reception room lights still on. Dad, why is Mom dressed like you today? Does she also do those researches? Kevin sat beside Ryan, asking doubtfully. Yes, your mom is just like Dad, a researcher. Just that I gave up my career for them. It was all in the past, mentioning it repeatedly was pointless. I knocked on the glass. Ryan and Kevin both looked up at me. I gestured that they should leave. In the elevator, Ryan said, I didn't let Kevin eat too many candies, because you always said to avoid cavities. It was like reporting to me. I didn't speak, staring ahead. In the past, when I instructed Kevin to eat less sugar, Ryan would just say casually, what's the big deal? Vivian always loved buying him snacks. When I took some away, Kevin would angrily pout and hit my arm, yelling, I hate Mom. Now, whether his teeth rot or not is none of my business. You still chose this career, I thought you didn't like it anymore, Ryan continued. I sighed, what makes you think I don't like it? My passion for this career is no less than yours. It's just that back then, compared to my career, I loved you more, loved this family more. The elevator arrived, and we walked out the company door, only to find it was pouring rain outside. Ryan took out an umbrella from his bag. Only one umbrella, the rain is too heavy. How about we squeeze together, and you hold Kevin? Kevin looked at me, with a hint of expectation in his eyes. I shook my head. No need, I'll take a cab. I hailed a cab and walked into it through the rain. Watching the retreating figures of Ryan and Kevin in the rain, I couldn't help but recall a previous rainy day when I brought an umbrella to pick him up at Ryan's door, but he got into Vivian's car, telling me they had something to do and to go back myself. I stood dazed in the rain, looking at myself who had come through the rain, just a huge joke. Actually, Ryan wasn't like this before. When it rained during school, I went to pick him up. He raised the corners of his lips and linked my arm. I really hope it rains every day. In the future, come pick me up whenever it rains, okay? The small umbrella couldn't cover both of us, yet neither got wet. But the one who first made the promise was the first to forget. One weekend, I went home to celebrate my mom's birthday. Unexpectedly, Ryan and Kevin had arrived at my parents' house before me. When I got home, they were in the kitchen helping my mom make dumplings. Clearly, he always said he had no time to come celebrate my mom's birthday before. Why didn't you come back together? My mom asked with a beaming smile when she saw me. Ryan wiped his hands on his apron and whispered beside me, seeing Mom so happy, I couldn't bear to say, how about we? I put down my coat and gifts and walked to the kitchen. Mom, Ryan and I have divorced. Sorry, I've been busy lately and forgot to tell you. The three hands stopped simultaneously. Mom looked at me, first frowning, then relaxing. All right. Your dad and I don't interfere in you young people's affairs. But everyone can come here. In the evening, my parents called me to the room. The atmosphere wasn't serious, I knew they just wanted to ask. My dad stared at me and said, wasn't it you who said Ryan has no family and you felt sorry for him? You quit your job, left home, now you have a family and a precious son, and you're willing to let go? Ryan lost his relatives young and suffered a lot growing up. I felt sorry for him and loved him. Your dad and I just want to ask if you've really thought it through? I nodded seriously. Men also need delicate emotions and responses. My parents said no more, patted my shoulder. As long as you've thought it through, we won't ask any more. That evening, Ryan suggested staying overnight at his grandparents' house. It's been ages since Kevin visited Grandpa and Grandma, his parents agreed cheerfully. What about you, Laura? Not staying overnight at your parents'? Ryan turned to me and said. I'll go back first, I have work tomorrow. You stay. Ryan grabbed my arm. Then I'll go back too, I forgot I have work tomorrow too. Kevin, stay with grandparents today, Mom and Dad will pick you up tomorrow, okay? I looked at Ryan puzzled. He had already pulled me outside. On the way, I drove. Ryan said, Kevin is still young, ultimately, he can't be without his mom. These days, he's always looking for you at home. I just said we'll pick him up together tomorrow, the day after is his birthday, just to make him happy. Can we? The car lights illuminated the road ahead, I was somewhat distracted. Although I had invested energy and love in raising this little guy, let's just say it was in vain. Many times when he could make wishes, like on birthdays, seeing rainbows, or releasing sky lanterns during New Year, Kevin's wishes were always for Vivian to be his mom, replacing me. I snapped back and said coldly, I have something tomorrow, I can't come. You're unwilling for such a small thing? Ryan, hearing my negative answer, became somewhat angry. I lost patience too. My voice was a bit loud. Ryan, we've divorced. In the future, can you not trouble me with every little thing? I'm not always revolving around you, father and son. Ryan's expression dimmed, he turned his head away and didn't speak the rest of the way. The next day, I really didn't go. In the lab, I even forgot about it. On the way home in the evening, passing a potted plant store, I went in to look. At a glance, I spotted the Phalaenopsis. Light purple Phalaenopsis flowers bloomed on slender branches, very beautiful. The owner told me Phalaenopsis are somewhat hard to care for and require more effort, and informed me of the precautions. Back home, I placed the Phalaenopsis below the windowsill, ventilated and able to absorb sunlight, but not too sunny. After checking related information online, I carefully watered and fertilized it, moving it according to temperature. After doing a series of things, the phone's piercing ring sounded again. Laura, what to do? Kevin. Ryan was frantic on the other end, his words unclear. Kevin is allergic to seafood. I just let him eat a little crab. How is it so serious? Laura, what should I do? Can you come take a look? Ryan, what can I see? I'm not a doctor. If Kevin is allergic to seafood, take him to the hospital. Why rush to call me? Or do you not know the hospital's number? After saying that, I hung up. Soon after, I had just left the company when Kevin ran up to me alone, still in hospital clothes. He must have run out from the hospital. Due to the seafood allergy, he was uncomfortable and had lost a lot of weight. His little hand tugged at my hem. Mom, did you really divorce Dad? Why didn't you come see me when I'm sick? Mom, hug me. I'm uncomfortable. He stretched out his hands asking for a hug. My heart spasmed. The hands in my pockets trembled slightly. But I just took out my phone and dialed the hospital. If you're uncomfortable, go to the hospital. Finding Mom is useless, I said coldly. After sending Kevin to the hospital, only now did I realize how much Kevin resembled his dad Ryan, not just in appearance, but in personality too. On an ordinary evening, after finishing caring for the Phalaenopsis, a university classmate I hadn't contacted for a long time called. Laura, long time no see. Yes, Emily, I replied. Right, this Saturday we're organizing a university classmate reunion. The great scientist Laura must come. You can't refuse. Didn't we all agree before to gather in the future, and whoever doesn't come isn't loyal enough, remember? Emily's words made it hard for me to refuse. Recalling those beautiful and innocent university days, I smiled. Okay, of course I'll come. After telling me the address, Emily hung up. On Saturday, I went to the reunion address, a private room in a restaurant. As I pushed open the door, there were faces both familiar and strange. Everyone seemed unchanged yet changed, but I could still recognize who was who. Two female classmates I got along well with before saw me and immediately ran over. Isn't this Laura? Finally willing to gather with us. Their faces were a bit flushed. I laughed. People haven't all arrived yet, and you've started drinking? I was pulled to a seat. I say, Laura, you haven't shown up for a while. No trace of you at the research institute, only occasionally seeing a few of your papers online. What big things are you doing? Emily came over, smiling mischievously. She is indeed doing big things, life's big events. Everyone around laughed. Is your relationship with Ryan still so good? Your love back then made us so envious. Yes, back then you quit your job for Ryan, ran so far just to be in the same city. Ah, no need to worry about our Laura's life, she has a son, a happy and complete family. Hey, why didn't you come together? Everyone's words caught me off guard. I smiled. Ryan and I have divorced. As soon as I said it, everyone was a bit awkward and at a loss. Ah, you've been together nearly 10 years, are you quarreling? I shook my head seriously. Really divorced. As I spoke, the door opened. It was Ryan and Kevin. Everyone's faces were a bit stiff and awkward. Ryan walked over, picked up a glass of wine, and chatted with everyone. After so long, those unadapted to my leaving had adapted. Probably like that. Kevin was no longer as active as before but sat obediently beside Ryan. Occasionally, someone asked whose child he was. He would point to Ryan and say, "That's my dad," then point to me, "That's my mom." The dinner was quite harmonious, everyone hadn't seen each other for a long time. The talks were about experiences these years and embarrassing stories from university. Anyway, hearing them now, having gone through them, just laugh it off. Many classmates drank a lot out of happiness. When leaving the room, they needed support. My alcohol tolerance is poor, I didn't drink much. Ryan drank quite a bit, his face flushed, but he seemed sober. Emily needed to vomit in the toilet, I supported her there. After vomiting, Emily rinsed her mouth, as if regaining consciousness. She patted my shoulder. "Laura, have you and Ryan really ended?" I stared at her and nodded. Emily sighed and turned her head aside. "You two are really a pity. Was the love so intense back then all fake?" "It wasn't fake, it's just gone now," I replied. Emily's face was full of sincerity. "Laura, you're over 30 now. Can't some things be let go for the sake of the past? Now the sun is so big, are you really willing? Small frictions between couples are normal, let alone you've been together so long. Besides, which couple reaches old age without some conflicts before?" I was about to speak when Emily continued. "I'll tell you secretly, actually, today's reunion was organized by Ryan, and he said to make sure to notify you." "What does that mean?" "He still has you in his heart, apologizing to you." Seeing Emily seemed to have finished. I said, "The couples you mentioned who reach old age are certainly not easy. But you're a woman too, I also need emotional responses, not just one-sided giving. I'm really tired. Ryan and I really have no possibility." Emily nodded and didn't continue. "Laura, you're really courageous. At 20, loving boldly, giving up everything, now at 30, able to let go and be yourself." I also patted Emily's shoulder and walked out of the toilet with her. Most people had left. Ryan and Kevin were still standing outside. Emily walked over, shook her head at Ryan, said something, and left. Ryan turned his head, his eyes a bit red. His whole face, unsure if from alcohol or the wind. "Mom, send us back, Dad is drunk." Kevin tugged at my hem and said, "I'll call a car for you." I was taking out my phone. Ryan choked and roared my name. "Laura." I met his gaze. The cold wind blew his hair somewhat messily. "Either you send us back today, or I'll call Vivian to pick up me and Kevin." He slid his phone to Vivian's contact page for me to see. "Mom, you send us, I don't want Aunt Vivian to send us." Kevin burst into tears, hugging my leg. I looked at them, withdrew my gaze, and stared ahead. "As you please." Ryan staggered in place as if in disbelief, smiled lightly, and dialed Vivian's number. Soon, Vivian arrived. Ryan got into Vivian's car. Kevin still hugged my leg crying, calling me, his throat almost hoarse. "Go," I said. "I'm not going, I want Mom." Kevin cried even louder. Ryan opened the window, sternly saying, "Kevin, get in the car." Kevin continued sobbing, reluctantly looking at me, then got into Vivian's car. I also hailed a cab home. On the way, I opened the window to dispel the alcohol on me. Cold wind drilled into my body from every crevice, I wrapped my clothes tighter. Back home, I unexpectedly found the phalaenopsis had bloomed. Light purple imprinted on white petals, like a cluster of dancing butterflies. I gently touched it, so beautiful. Originally, seeing something you carefully nurtured bloom and bear perfect fruit is such a feeling. A gust of wind blew, the phalaenopsis petals gently touching my fingers. Was this feedback to me? From then on, I fell in love with cultivating potted plants, buying all sorts of large and small, various types, and placing them at home. After learning and recording each knowledge online, I applied targeted care. They also thrived under my daily tending. One day after work, there was urgent knocking at the door. I opened it. It was Ryan and Kevin. Ryan's eyes were bloodshot, as if he had been drinking again. "What's the matter?" I didn't know how they knew my address, I asked. Ryan didn't speak, pushed me aside, and walked straight into my home. He started entering the bedroom, bathroom, kitchen. Everywhere he went, he turned upside down. He hurriedly went to the living room, crazily pulling out and lifting sofa cushions. I watched the scattered toiletries, quilts, sofa cushions on the floor. Raising my eyes, I met Ryan's gaze. He widened his eyes, muttering, "Where did you hide him? How can there be no trace?" He shook my shoulders. I pulled away. "I have no affair, no cheating, I live here alone, no one else." Ryan's eyes red, voice choking. "This is impossible, impossible, I really can't think why you don't want us, I really can't." After saying that, Ryan slumped on the floor, murmuring, "Didn't you love me very much? Didn't you love Kevin very much? How can you say you don't want us and just don't?" Ryan roared. I pulled Kevin, who had been standing at the door, inside and closed the door. "Weren't you most afraid of my tears? You said when I cry, your heart hurts too, you said whatever I say when crying, you'll agree. Now I want you to come home with us, Laura." Finally, Ryan called my name in a pleading tone. Previously, I was indeed most afraid of Ryan being sad. When he was heartbroken, I felt pained. But now, I felt nothing. Love can be eroded over time. And the one eroded first was Ryan. Loving or not loving is too obvious. Starting from when you didn't answer my calls, from when you only smiled chatting with others, from when you didn't listen to my words, from when you took off the wedding ring. When these small things had already happened, it meant we were about to end. And the one who first lost feeling, first let go, wasn't it you? Ryan. I had many thoughts inside, but I said nothing. Ryan still cried, unlike his usual shrewd and capable self. "I've hung the wedding photo back, let's start over, okay?" He held my hand, face full of tear streaks. I withdrew my hand and said flatly, "It doesn't matter anymore." That night, I took Ryan and Kevin to the guest room to rest for the night. I tidied the house and barely slept the whole night. In the morning, Kevin surprisingly got up earlier than me. When I left the bedroom, Kevin was standing in front of the windowsill full of potted plants I grew. He was about to reach out to touch that phalaenopsis. I stopped him. "Don't touch it," I finally raised it well. Kevin withdrew his hand, just staring at these various-sized potted plants. Soon, Ryan got up, looking much more conscious. "Sorry for the trouble." Then, he looked at where Kevin stood and said, "When did you start liking growing potted plants?" I drank some water, looked at the windowsill, and said, "Potted plants are much easier to raise than people. Even publicly recognized hard-to-raise potted plants, under careful care and protection, can bloom in response to me." After saying that, I withdrew my gaze. Ryan heard the implication. He smiled, "So that's it. I won't disturb you anymore in the future." Same for Kevin, but if you have time, can you come see him? Ryan sat on the sofa, tentatively saying, "The company got me an opportunity for overseas research, probably won't have time in the future." I said. Ryan nodded with a bitter smile, pursed his lips. "Then I'll go, take care of yourself." Saying that, he stood up, pulling Kevin. "But I still want to tell you." Ryan turned around. "I love you very much. Only you. Perhaps we ultimately couldn't escape time's curse, the promised growing old together is something few couples achieve after all." I raised my eyes. "It's not because of time, you forced me to leave, you let go first." Ryan was clearly stunned, his eyes starting to redden again. He turned away, pulling Kevin behind him. Kevin kept looking at me until reaching the door. He fiercely clutched the door, crying loudly, I'm not going, I'm not going." "Dad, you said you'd bring Mom back, you lied." "I want Mom, I want Mom. I want Mom to live with us." Kevin cried heart-wrenchingly. Ryan pulled the struggling Kevin with both hands, his own voice carrying a sob, "We're going home. Mom, I don't want Aunt Vivian anymore, I only want you. In the future, I'll brush my teeth well, not eat snacks, sleep on time every night, not eat seafood, not worry Dad, okay?" I had already confirmed I wouldn't soften again, confirmed my resolve. Kevin is still young, many things he may not understand yet. Treating my occasional strictness as my flaw, I can understand. But if he always takes my goodness and care for granted, I'll be very disheartened. How I treat him, he should feel it with heart. Instead of repeatedly saying words that hurt and sting me. So ultimately, I didn't get up, didn't hug Kevin. In the end, the child couldn't resist the adult. Carried away by Ryan from my home. Until closing the door, I could still hear his cries. In the afternoon, I packed luggage. Looking at the windowsill potted plants, I was somewhat troubled. I took a few easy-to-wear transport plants. The rest I took back to my parents' house for them to care for. I was reassured. After all, whether cats or dogs, as long as my parents raise them, they're sure to be plump. The moment I boarded the plane, I turned back to look at this city. Though not my hometown, it was once my most loved city. When leaving, there was some reluctance. But no matter how much, I could only let go. It's not that couples can only have bland companionship. As individuals, we still need emotional responses. From many unworthy to mention small things, I knew we would end soon after. But I don't deny our past beautiful love. Nor reject the time when you drove me away. In love, we should be able to pick up and let go. And children easily imitate one parent's attitude toward the other. If you love him, your child loves him. When everything is irretrievable, talking about the past is ultimately empty.